Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Mythos Busters. I'm Sean, I'm one of your hosts. Oh, and by the way, if you're going back and checking your log to see if you missed episode 1, don't worry. It's a little game we like to play to check our listeners' sanity. This is, in fact, episode 2. Last one was episode 0 or episode 1, depending on who you ask. But you didn't miss anything. Joining me tonight, we also have Ian.
Hello.
How's it going, Ian?
Pretty good. Just excited to record again. I guess it's a way to stave off the madness of waiting for this game to come out.
It surely is a thing. Oh, man. Every time a new spoiler comes out, I produce a little bit more saliva.
Well, at least they're keeping us well supplied with our fixes instead of, I was like thinking we'd have to wait for like a month for new articles or something.
Yes, there is that. Joining us as well, we've got Nicholas.
Hello.
And how are you, sir? If Nick, and it's probably more me, sound a little bit ragged, a little bit frayed, it's because I'm one of the 12 people left in the world who still throw rock band parties, and we were up till about 2 a.m. last night rocking it out.
Yeah, it's definitely more you than me, I think, at this point.
Yes,
I'm doing okay.
ragged.
I don't even feel it.
I took an unexpected nap this afternoon from about 3 to about 7.
Nicely done.
Which to me says that I probably should have just slept last night.
I'd say that's about what I slept last night, was from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m., so...
Man, you're hardcore, man, and you've got an infant too, so props to you.
Yeah, that's why I slept till 7.
Rounding out the team, we've got my man Tom.
What's up, guys? Good to hear you guys again. I am freshly returned home after globetrotting a little bit, sealing portals around the world.
Yeah, where'd you get to... So I saw you made it to Scotland.
I did. I went
England.
to Scotland. I went to UK, traveled around there a bit. Actually, we ended up going to a gaming convention in Birmingham, which was a lot of fun. It was a video game convention. And yeah, met up with a lot of people out there and hung out with some of the film crew that I was working with. And overall, it was a pretty damn good trip. But I am glad to be back home. Man, it feels good to sleep in my bed for the first time in about 4 months. It's a good feeling.
Oh, man. I spent one night at my dad's house last night. I'm like, get me to my bed, please.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'm just the weak one in the group. That's what I'm finding out.
Just finding that out now?
First one to go insane. Calling it.
It's death by inches, Nick. I'm finding it out piece by piece as it comes to me. So we've
Slow
got
journey to self discovery.
Yes, I think probably Shia LaBeouf's going to play me in the movie.
Oh no.
I'll get a crew together. Let's make this happen.
Yes. So we've got an extra fun episode tonight. I'm excited as well. I've been waiting since the last time we stopped record to record again. So we're going to cover, we've got a couple news articles that have come out that I'm really excited to talk about. And then this is the episode where we're going to talk about the game itself, how it plays, what we understand the rules to be from our community interactions and from our Gen Con demos. And then we're going to talk about a couple cards before we wrap it up with some tentacle time. Guys, are you ready?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Oh yeah.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Well, so I think we got some pretty good feedback on our last episode. People were generally excited to join in on our enthusiasm related to the game. We got some good feedback on various things, so we'll be making changes as necessary there. Anything you guys wanted to touch on, based on last episode? Anything we talked about along those lines?
Nothing?
I'm feeling
just
pretty good about it.
Yeah, everybody all together now.
all at once.
Maybe we got to figure out our timing when we want to talk. That's probably the thing we got to work on most. But beyond that, I think for first episode, we're kind of finding our feet here a little bit. But I think it went pretty well.
Yeah. I was very pleased with how it came out. All right, so let's get rolling then. So we've got 2 news articles here. First one, talking a little bit more about the game itself. So I can't remember where we landed on who was going to cover this tonight, but Tom, are you ready to step up?
Yeah, why not? We have an article titled "Clues, Challenge, and Chaos," And it kind of talks a bit about what the investigators are doing.
Just a quick
Yes.
message to FFG's marketing. I want to just relate that I appreciate the effort they're going through to make each of these articles alliterative.
Yes, for sure. So this article talks about or a bit about what you're doing as the investigators in the game. So it kind of lays out the kind of a scenario objective and what you're trying to do to advance in the game. So there is there's kind of two decks that sit side by side one another. There's an agenda deck and there's an act deck, and these are kind of two sides of a book if you put them together. And on the left side of the agenda deck is kind of
love that templating so much.
It's brilliant. Yeah, the graphic design and everything is really blowing me away in this game. But so the left card is the agenda deck, and that's kind of the encounter deck or the enemies deck. What is trying to advance itself. So it's kind of the clock that you're racing against in order to succeed in the scenario. And you, as the investigators, are trying to progress through the act deck on the right side. And there's a value there which determines how many clue tokens you need to collect in order to advance to the next page, if you will, of that deck.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, clues have always kind of been an abstract way to explain the gathering of information, the satisfying of objectives in these games.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also pretty cool that we get the other side of that too. As opposed to Lord of the Rings, we've got one quest, and the only thing the encounter deck is trying to do is stop you from progressing. This adds a whole nother layer on there. So not only are the enemies trying to actively inhibit you from doing what you're trying to do, but they also have their own thing going on. I think it'll be pretty cool to see kind of the space they have where this encounter deck, doesn't really care about what you're doing. It's just going to try as hard as it can to advance its agenda as fast as it can, and you better hope you keep up, versus something that's maybe countering you a little bit harder.
Yeah,
Exactly.
One of the things I really like is that kind of every cooperative game, you need some kind of timer, otherwise players can just kind of twiddle their thumbs, get set up like, some huge army or Hulk up, whatever the case may be, and just roll over. So you need that timer. But I think what makes each cooperative game different is how it handles, like, how that timer works, like in Lord of the Rings. And I guess if you're following along at home and playing the Lord of the Rings reference drinking game, you're well on your way to inebriation by now. And
I don't think those people are with us anymore.
I don't think they
they're
died
gonna
on the last
survive.
episode of alcohol poisoning.
But in Lord of the Rings, that timer is kind of your threat. Each turn you raise your threat up by 1, and if you hit 50, you lose. But the thing I like it here is that it's not just a straight timer, like down to 0 or up to some number. It's advancing through these cards, which means
Yes.
kind of things are going to change for the encounter deck, and what it's doing is going to change as the game comes on, which I think is a nice little twist to just having. Like,
Well, and another thing too that I'm noticing here is that so with Lord of the Rings, it's like, okay, the whole goal is there's so many progress that we need to make in order to advance, and that's as a team. So it's you can do it all, I can do it all, we can split it up. But with this one, in order for the players to advance, it's X amount of clue tokens per investigator. So every turn, each investigator has to be finding those clue tokens, because each turn you're adding a doom counter or whatever it's called to the agenda deck or the agenda card. So that's always going to make progress. And if you as an investigator don't get your clues, well, then you're literally holding the team back. I think that's really cool that it divvies up the responsibility like that.
Now, does it divvy up? I'm not actually sure myself. I thought it was just merely you have it's a scaling effect. Basically, you need to accumulate as a group X number of tokens to progress through the act, and usually that number you need to collect is increased with the more investigators you have in play. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
Oh, that was probably my mistake then. I assumed that the per investigator symbol meant each investigator needed 2, not a total of whatever.
Yeah.
That was okay. So ignore that whole point that I just brought up, and let's move on like nothing
Sorry, I didn't
happened.
mean to torpedo your whole explanation there.
That's fine. I'll find another thing
It is a
later.
group total, but I mean, I guess part of the strategy in the game and multiplayer then will be like, I guess it's kind of like Eldritch or Arkham Horror in that way. Like, how do you want to divvy
Yeah.
up that responsibility as investigators? Like, is everyone trying to get the clues, or are you going to have like a dedicated clue person and another one who's like, killing monsters or whatever it may be?
I am really fascinated to see how the generalist versus specialist dynamic works in this game. Whether one is viable or both are viable, or where you're kind of maybe it's on a per scenario basis based on how far apart things are spread or something like that. But yeah, that'll be cool to explore.
Yeah, and so regarding these clue tokens, and going back to the article, it then goes on to explain how you might earn some of these clue tokens. So there will be locations in this game that are revealed either by the scenario that you're playing, or maybe by the encounter deck. And when a location comes into play, it tells you how many clue tokens it has available on it for your investigators to grab from. It also has what they're calling a shroud value, which is kind of the difficulty. That's the difficulty where you need to investigate, and you need to meet or beat that number in order to successfully gain a clue token. So in the example in the article, it has Roland Banks tries to investigate the study, which is the location that he's currently at. And an investigate action uses your intellect, which is one of your stats that your character has. And he has an intellect of 3, which is greater than the study's shroud value of 2, but it's not that simple. There's always going to be a bit of randomness.
You didn't think it was going to be that easy, did you?
Exactly. So in this game, as I'm sure most of you are aware, there is a chaos bag filled of assorted tokens. And these tokens have a bunch of different effects on it. Most of them have kind of a plus or minus value. So when you do your investigate test, you're going to be drawing a token from the bag, and that might increase or decrease your skill value. And that will, basically inform you whether or not you succeed or fail on this test. And what's cool about this chaos bag, and I can't remember if we mentioned this last week or not, but some of these tokens don't have a simple number on them. Some of them have a symbol that by themselves don't necessarily mean anything, but there is a card for the scenario which dictates what that symbol means, which is, I think, it's fantastic because it gives these symbols flexibility on what they might do to you per each scenario.
Yes. And no, I don't think we had this information available to us last time. So, outside of our Gen Con demo, of course. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's an awesome way that they leave themselves so much design space to play around with various effects in each scenario. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, just taking an example, the token card, I don't even know what this card's called, but the token card that they have in the article here for the Gathering, which I believe is the first scenario, right? That's
I think
the one
so.
that they're
Yeah,
demoing currently.
Scenario.
So if you pull the Skull token, you get minus X to your test, where X is the number of ghoul enemies at your location. But Occultist token is worth -1, and it penalizes you if you fail. You're going to take an additional horror if you fail a test as a result of pulling that token. So the space here is just so wide for them to do kind of crazy effects. Like we could conceivably get tokens that do good things for us. We could get tokens that kind of have a little bit of both. I don't know. I really appreciate the fact that they've left themselves space to design cool things here.
Absolutely. And the other thing I want to mention, we did bring this up last time as well, is that the Chaos Bag is one of the ways in which you can. Let me actually back up. When you start a scenario, you can choose which difficulty you want to play at. Mm-hmm. And the difficulty you choose will kind of seed the Chaos Bag with, there's like a listing of what tokens you're supposed to add to the bag for whatever difficulty that you wish to play at. And again, I think that's another brilliant way of, giving the designers flexibility.
Yeah, it definitely allows you to choose if, easier, and they even list on there too, going through the story, you're going to go easier. But if you're someone like me, the first thing you're going to do is go to expert, the hardest difficulty, just so that you have that that measuring stick, that barometer to go, okay, that's not a good idea, so let's back it off a little bit. But you always got to, in Arkham, you always got to try that hardest difficulty. You have to. Literally
throwing yourself in the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Literally, unliterally. Yeah, so we actually have a little bit, there was a post on the Arkham Horror LCG subreddit where someone was actually able to snag a couple pictures of the rulebook from the demo. So one of the pieces that they got was for campaign setup, and it looks like this is for the campaign specifically of the scenarios that are in the core box. So this is what tells you how to assemble the bag. So not only do they have the flexibility in these alternate symbols, but it looks like they might change the mix-up of the bags based on the cycle or
that's a good
campaign
point.
that you're playing. So that's really cool too. So it looks like, kind of looking at standard mode here, there are 16 base tokens in the bag that range from varying levels of numerical values, +1 down to -4, and then a mix of those special tokens.
Yes, yes. And also, I want to mention there's an interesting tidbit in this article that mentions campaign mode. I guess as you play through the course of a campaign, the tokens in the bag might actually change as well, depending on certain effects that might happen during your campaign. You might add or remove tokens as indicated by certain cards or card effects.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I think that's I think that is the coolest thing about the token bag, which was a mechanic that I was kind of lukewarm on, originally, and I haven't actually gotten my hands on it, so I don't know, I didn't do that Gen Con demo or anything. But I think the fact that it changes from one scenario to the next and that you can influence that change or potentially influence it, I think is the coolest thing about that. So
Yeah, I mean, now might be a good time to bring up the fact that if there's one part of this game, everyone I've seen has been pretty excited, but if there's one part people have reservations on, it's this token bag aspect versus dice versus some other mechanism. Maybe we can talk about it more in the Gen Con demo experience. I'm not sure, but what are your guys' thoughts kind of on that, on the token bag in general?
I mean, yeah, I gotta admit, I was, I guess, slightly lukewarm when I first heard about it. But the more, when I did play the Gen Con demo, and kind of from what they've been talking about in this article, I think it's fantastic. It gives the designers a lot of flexibility and design space on what they can do with these tokens in the token bag. And, a lot more than just a simple, some dice or some other mechanic. And so I'm actually really excited about it.
yeah, and I've said before, I've gone on record saying that I'm a fan of card games that are contained in the cards. Like if you can get a card game where all you need is that deck of cards, like that to me is my favorite way to play. But then again, you don't buy a Fantasy Flight Games card game to just get a deck of cards. Like there's always peripherals in there. But so anytime I see extra tokens and stuff like that, it's like, was there a way to integrate it? But these cards are already so packed with text and abilities and stuff that I think they made the right choice to just do tokens. And it's different than dice too, so it's not like you have more dice to add to your collection. It's
Yes.
something that kind of sets the game apart from other similar titles. So
Right. So that's my take on it. Is it's kind of a cool way of adding that RPG like dice rolling element without actually having dice, and it's more flexible than dice because if you've got a D20 in a game down the campaign, the GM can't randomly just swap one of those die faces for a different symbol or a different number or a modification or something like that.
right,
But they leave
right.
themselves the room to play around with things like that with the dice bag, or with the chaos bag rather. And one other thing I thought was really cool. So this is obviously the element of the unknown that this game has. So like Lord of the Rings has shadow cards. If you're playing against an intelligent
Drink.
opponent, you've got there it is. If you're playing against an intelligent opponent in another game, you've got events that can screw up your plans or spells or whatever game you're playing. And I really think it's kind of a cool space to play. I mean, you could get new tokens in the future. Say there's a campaign down the road where there's a freeze token in there, and we're at the Mountains of Madness, and if you pull the freeze token, all of a sudden you're exposed to the elements, and you lose an action or something like that, and they leave the space wide open to kind of explore cool things like that. So I am pretty stoked about the direction this is taking. Now,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
said,
Yeah,
16 tokens, and one of them is the Elder Sign, which we're going to talk about probably in a minute. And Elder Sign's kind of like it's kind of analogous to a critical in a tabletop RPG. So at least it's better odds than a D20, right?
yeah, that's
I guess so.
true.
That's true.
I feel like I was kind of hesitant maybe at first, like some of you guys and like a lot of people out there, but I feel like my hesitation was kind of this weird sense of like, is it going to be truly random? Because certain tokens are going to get like, is it really going to be nice and mixed up? And am I psychologically going to be drawing the same token over and over? But I think a lot of my problems with that will be solved by the simple measure of using like a cup instead of a bag, or something where I can nicely just shake it up and draw it out, and I think it's fine.
I actually really think that your component upgrade solution was really good, Ian, in that you've got an actual dice cup, so you can put the lid on it, shake it up.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about the bag is you got to do the thing where you reach to the bottom, and then you ruffle your fingers around to get all those good, you get all the good tokens up from the bottom, right? But if you've got a kind of a shaking mechanism in your, quote unquote bag, then that's kind of a cool way to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that kind of wraps up the first article, talking about the investigators and what you're trying to do and how you collect your clue tokens. Ian, do you want to go ahead and tackle this second article?
Sure. So the next one is... One second.
Put you on the spot.
It's more alliteration.
Yeah, more alliteration. Did we go over, in this last article, did we go over how the skill test worked exactly or not?
We did not really touch it. Oh, in the article?
Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, sorry. We kind of touched on it, but it'd probably be a good idea to lay that foundation, so go for it.
Okay, so the basic mechanic, I guess kind of the central mechanic of the game, is you have skill tests that might test one of the 4 skills, and then it's going to go over against some kind of...
What are those
number.
4 skills, Ian?
The 4 skills are intellect, which is the little book, so how smart you are. The little foot with wings is agility. The fist is combat.
I'm gonna call it Hermes.
The Hermes. The combat symbol,
Mercury,
which some people on the Discord channel have given the affectionate alternate title of the ass kick skill.
Yes.
And the little head is willpower. So whatever card you're facing or whatever you're doing will tell you what skill to check. It's going to give you a number, and then that's going to go against the skill number you have on your investigator card. So maybe your investigator is good at combat, so he has a 4, and maybe you're going against the 2. Then you have the opportunity to commit any cards you have in hand to that check, and on each card there's the little icons of these 4 skills on it, and that can pump up your value to give you a better chance. And then finally you draw that token, what we've been talking about from the chaos bag, and that is usually going to be a negative number of some kind. So basically you need to...
based on the mix, it's usually going to be a terrible negative number.
Right, so you might have a chance of getting that like +1 in standard or zeros, but more often than not, if you want a chance, you're going to have some kind of higher value than the difficulty number you're going against.
You want to aim high.
Yep.
Yeah, and one thing I also want to just point out is when you're taking a skill test and you can discard cards from your hand to boost your skill numbers if they have the matching icons. One thing I found cool is when you're playing multiplayer and another investigator is at your same location, he can also pitch a card that has the relevant symbol on it to boost your check as well.
Yeah, it's a really cool way to make that super cooperative.
And just in general, I like that aspect of like every card in your deck has those icons, so you never really have a dead card. And I like that's something that's kind of in the Conquest LCG, and I think Star Wars has something similar, right? I'm correct in that? I've never played
more or less, yeah, with the Force icons.
Yeah, so I like that aspect of it as well.
One other thing that so you've got the skill cards, and then at least I had in my Gen Con demo one other card that was an asset that actually sat on the table and allowed me to spend resources to boost a certain stat prior to pulling a chaos token. So cool ways to more or less hedge your bets, I guess, to make sure you succeed that test that you're going for.
Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but pulling the chaos token is always the last thing you do. Like, you cannot alter your skill test after that chaos token has been pulled, correct?
Unless you have a specific ability, which Wendy, it turns out, does. But yeah, I believe that to be, in general, the rule.
Sounds good. So we ready to move on to this second article here?
Mm-hmm. So the second one is the more alliteration of mystery, murder, and madness. So as you can tell by those words, this one is focusing kind of more on what the I always want to call it the encounter deck. Is it called the encounter deck in this game?
Yes,
It is called the encounter
Okay.
deck. Just don't call it a quest.
Yeah, I'm always getting
Like I keep
confused on
doing.
the terminology. Okay, so the encounter deck. So this article is focusing on what the encounter deck consists of and what it's trying to do to players. So it goes over the kind of act and agenda thing again, which the last article touched on. The piece of new information, or slightly new information, that it brings up is how the encounter deck is formed, which there are basically different encounter sets, which consist of cards of a certain theme, like rats or just kind of horrific effects, and they're divided into these different encounter sets. So when you build a scenario's encounter deck, you're going to blend together those different encounter sets, including the special one for that scenario, which consists of kind of the locations that you're going to be going through and kind of special cards. And that's all going to be mixed together to form the encounter deck you're going to face. And in that encounter deck, there's gonna be enemies, and there's gonna be treacheries, which are different, all kinds of bad stuff that can happen to you.
Oh, just so many manner of bad things.
Yeah, I'm looking over the treachery cards in this article, and none of them look like a good time.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll get some nice one that's like ice cream party or something that shows up.
It could just be a nothing happens card, like just something like that.
That's so true. Sometimes the best thing that happens to you is nothing in these games.
Oh yeah.
It should just be like a card called "What was that noise?" and then the text just says, "Oh, it was nothing. Nothing happened."
But losing sanity anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the example they give in the article is this Frozen in Fear, which I believe... No, this wasn't the one I drew during the demo. That was the Dissonant Voices, which is later on. This one you put into play in your threat area. So in front of you, there's going to be a special area that holds enemies and all kinds...
All the terrible things that are doing their things to you.
Yep, all the stuff that is posing a threat to your well-being. And this one says the first time you perform... well, I guess I should say, before we do this, there are going to be some spoilers to encounter cards right now, because I know some people are kind of not wanting to avoid any encounter card spoilers, so they're going to go in blind.
I'm with you, but this really doesn't have anything to do with the story.
Right?
I don't
yeah,
think.
I think in general
definitely.
we will be careful about that. But this is just one card,
Yeah.
so if you are like super kind of paying attention to that and wanting to avoid, just plug your ears for about 30 seconds. Okay, so this card...
Diet spoilers ahead.
The first time you perform an action, each round, one of the following actions, either move, fight, or evade, it costs one additional action. So it's basically taxing your actions, which in any of these kind of games where you have a set of actions really sucks.
Yes.
Anytime you have to spend extra actions. And to get rid of it at the end of your turn, you can do a test of willpower, and if you succeed, you get rid of it. So that's one thing that's kind of cool. This reminds me...
Test of will, drink.
Yes.
This reminds me of things called condition attachments in Lord of the Rings. Drink, which affect you and do the similar kind of thing where it taxes you. But the bad thing is, in that game, a lot of times you can't get rid of it unless you have a special player card that gets rid of it. But this one, built into it, gives you the opportunity to do a skill test to get rid of it. And
I
like
appreciate
Yeah.
that so much,
That's-
because without the way to get rid of it, it feels like an auto lose, and as a player, it's such a feel bad moment when you get it, and you're like, well,
Yeah. I
I
have no
guess
answer
this
to
is
this.
staying here all game.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of my wife and I. We just played Arkham Horror this last week, the board game, and this reminds me a lot of the conditions and effects that are in that game. Is that whether they're good or bad, the game reminds you they're probably temporary. They kind of take care of themselves. So I like to see that they carried that idea over into the treachery cards here.
Except for those dark pacts, guys. Careful what you sign in blood.
Yeah, well, yeah. Then there's that.
But the really cool thing is you can already see the strategy that's going to be baked into this game as far as like those skill icons you have in hand. Like, are you going to blow those during your turn to do a skill test, or are you going to wait to the end of the round to try to pass this willpower test to get rid of this bad thing? Like,
Right.
what are you going to use your cards for? So that's kind of like the example they give of the treacheries, and each treachery has a revelation ability, which basically just means that when you draw it, it's going to affect. Yeah, you do the thing, and it affects the investigator who drew it. So each investigator takes a turn drawing a card, and it affects whoever drew it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else really digging the templating on the treacheries with like the keyhole?
Oh, I think it's beautiful.
It's so pretty. I'm also curious that this one we have here has it looks like a trait, the terror trait.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It's really interesting to see when they do traits whether they're there just for flavor or maybe whether in the future that will mean something. We'll have some way to just like auto get rid of a terror treachery or something like that. So that'll be cool to see how that develops too.
For sure.
So they also move on from the treacheries to give an example of enemies and their templating, which I also appreciate. Just kind of how everything is laid out. And the example they give is the ghoul priest, who is a big boy. He has some high stats. So each enemy has a fight value and an evade value. So those are the things those are the difficulty values of whether you're gonna fight or run away from it. If you fight, you test against the fight value, simple enough. And if you want to run away, you test against the evade value.
Well, I'm pretty sure we're gonna call it evading.
Instead of running away.
Run away!
Don't pick on Wendy just because she's really bad at fighting. I don't think I did one combat check in the entire demo.
Yeah, I'll probably call it running away, I'm sure. But
well, then I'll take retreating.
Running away. Yeah, when someone else is doing it, I'll call it running away, and when I do it, it's evading.
There it is.
Yeah.
So you test against one, and that is already a cool thing. The fact that you have the option of fighting or running away, and of course that kind of takes from Arkham wait, they don't have running away in Eldritch, right? Yeah, there's no.
I don't think so.
But Arkham Horror, there was.
Arkham Horror,
right?
the monsters actually like move around the board, and half of the game is just like avoiding them and going, all right, I guess I'll go around this street and everything. So it feels more kind of like in line with that, in that you can kind of just kind of kite the monsters around and just focus on other things while they're, making their way from location to location.
Ooh, good MMO reference.
I think it's just a gaming reference, but yeah.
Yeah, it's totally nice having that option, though, of like, that you don't have to fight them. You can run away and try to do some strategy there. And then each enemy has a health value. That's how much damage you have to do. In the case of this ghoul priest, it's 5 per investigator.
Yeah.
Oh my
god. So in a 2-player game, that's already 10 health that you have to chew through somehow.
Now, keep in mind, the article does mention that when you do a combat test against an enemy, if you succeed, you deal 1 damage. So
unless otherwise modified.
Yes. Now, I know there are certain assets and abilities that you can get in game that can increase this damage, but by default, you're doing 1 damage per combat check. So when you have an enemy, I'm looking at this enemy with like
4-player.
Yeah.
4-player. He's got like 20 health. I'm like, oh, jeez, this is gonna be rough.
I definitely do appreciate the per investigator symbol they're using on clues and kind of enemies like this that help to scale it for number of players.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really genius.
And then there's a couple of keywords on here: prey, hunter, and retaliate. And then on the bottom it tells you there's 2 little heart symbols for damage and 2 little brain symbols for horror, which should be familiar to you if you've played some of the other Arkham Files games from FFG. And this is how much damage and horror this enemy does to you when it attacks.
Ouch.
That seems like a lot.
And there's no stipulation on enemy attacks. Like, it's just like, if he attacks you, boom, there's the damage and the horror, unless you have a card that somehow negates it, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So the onus is on the player, like 100% to either beat the guy down before he can swing, or to just stay out of his way.
Mm-hmm.
Manage him some way, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Ian, you did mention a couple of keywords on this Ghoul Priest card, such as prey. Now, as far as I understand it, when you, as the investigator, are drawing an encounter card, and if it's an enemy, the default is that enemy then becomes engaged with you and gets put in your threat area. However, it looks like if there is a prey keyword, it will then that enemy will then go to whatever the prey is explaining, telling you where to put it. In the case of the Ghoul Priest, it says highest fight value. So I guess the investigator who has the highest combat stat then will then get the Ghoul Priest engaged with him.
Mm-hmm. It's going to look at the person with the biggest muscles and just point at them and say, you. And so it has the Hunter and Retaliate. So in the kind of round in actions card, which I was able to take a picture from during Gen Con, and I believe some other people took pictures of that as well. And I believe, that is up on our Facebook if you want to take a look at those. So take a look through the photos and you'll find it. But in the round sequence during the enemy phase, it does mention the hunter keyword, and it says there's a specific step that says enemies with the hunter keyword move towards the nearest investigator. So normally enemies just stay there. They're not going to move unless they have hunter, in which case they're going to move towards the nearest person, which could be bad.
Now, one thing that I'm still a little unclear is that if there's an enemy in a location and you happen to be at the location, does he become engaged with you at any time automatically, or how does that work?
This was actually something that I came across in my demo. Since Wendy kind of has a high evade or agility value, so she's a lot better at evading than she is fighting. So enemies have two states in this game. They are either ready or exhausted, which is pretty cool. So if an enemy is ready, it will auto-engage anyone that comes into its area.
I see.
But if you evade an enemy, or through whatever other effect, I suppose, the enemy will be exhausted. You basically break your engagement with the enemy, and it sits in the location. And if it's exhausted, it's not going to engage anyone in that room until it readies again. So it's kind of a cool way to... And I actually really appreciate this, because one of the coolest things about Eldritch, Arkham, all of these games has been like it's not imperative that you be a fighter.
Right.
There are many ways to approach the game. You can be the sneaky investigator. You can be, the Wendy, the street urchin who's probably going to slip through the cracks and, know all the different escape routes and things like that. So I really appreciated the fact that you can deal with enemies in a way that's not just bashing their heads in.
And it leads to some cool team-up moves, because in that demo, you were playing Wendy, Sean, and you evaded the enemy, which exhausted it. And then I'm big meathead Roland, so I just charge into the room and start hacking at it. But the nice thing is, because it's exhausted, it didn't engage me, and so it didn't attack me that turn, which meant I could avoid that damage, but stay in that room and hack at it again next turn. So you can definitely do those kind of team-up moves.
So it's going to add good value, I think, to the agility stat. It's not going to make it, only applicable to, side tests and that sort of thing. It's going to be an important piece of combat, because it felt like evading the enemy did a lot when we got there.
Yeah, definitely. So beyond that, I think I went through the Ghoul Priest, the monster, and I think that was about it for that article, unless I'm forgetting something huge. It pretty much just went through the templating of the two encountered card types, which was treacheries and enemies.
Yeah, and then it had that image at the bottom of those hideous rat people coming out of the floor of the bathroom. Like, good God.
Yeah, I think you need to call the exterminators at that point.
I think you need to move.
So one other thing that I wanted to point out that's kind of peripheral here, we got a little bit of a spread in the middle of the article where it actually shows an active play area with 2 players. And oh my God, if anything is exciting my want to get my hands on this game, it's this picture. Just to see all the locations out. We got some enemies at places. It looks like we've got an enemy with a Doom token on it, because that's a thing. We've got the investigator that we've not yet spoiled, who I believe from Eldritch people have been able to surmise based on the picture that it's Agnes Baker. So assuming that they're not just using her picture for a different investigator. God, yeah, I don't know. It needs to be November or October. Speaking of
Yeah.
which,
Good segue.
well, since I failed to follow Ian's good order notes here, he suggested that I should mention this at the top of the episode, and I neglected to do so. But there is a third article that's not really news per se, but it is news. So it was FFG talking about their Arkham Knights 2016 event. So they finally put out the announcement for getting pre-registration rolling and that sort of thing, telling us what's going to be there. So this is going to be on October 14th and 15th at the Fantasy Flight Event Center in Roseville, Minnesota. Come if you can. I will be there, and hopefully I'll be able to cajole Nick to be there as well.
Oh, I already have plans in place.
Fantastic. So it's 2 days of terror, where basically like I mentioned last time, it's basically a big celebration of all their Lovecraft-themed games. So they're going to be featuring Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror, Elder Signs. The new Mansions of Madness is going to be pretty well featured, I imagine. And the good news is that Arkham Horror will be on release that weekend. Yes. Now, the article didn't go to say whether or whether not that was before or after it's going to be generally released. I hope it's around the same time, just so not everyone has to wait. But it's going to be amazing to get our hands on it. One cool thing that they're doing is on the Friday night of that weekend, they're actually just facilitating a developer chat with Matt and Nate to talk about the development of Arkham Horror LCG. I assume they're going to field some questions. I'm really looking forward to sitting in on that, and we will do our best to record it, because I imagine that that would be something that a lot of people would want to get their hands on.
Oh yeah,
or ears, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, it's always exciting to hear developer insight and the things that kind of the decisions they make to get to the game's final product. Like, that's always exciting for me, for sure, and I'm sure everyone else.
Yeah, and
listening to
I'm a huge process nerd, so if we can dive in with them about the development process and kind of where it started, and were there different elements that were in it that didn't make it, or
Right.
anything they can tell us along those lines, it's going to be real cool. So the swag that they have planned this year is pretty cool. They are giving out a dice bag with a really nice Elder Sign symbol on it, which actually looks like the Elder Sign symbol from Arkham Horror LCG specifically, so it's probably a deliberate upgrade to the Chaos bag. They're also giving out 16 acrylic health and sanity tokens, which I think can be used pretty much across any of their games, since that's such a common element. So that's cool. And then, this was the completely unexpected part that I am just thrilled about. We're actually getting, already, a one-off print-on-demand scenario pack for Arkham Horror, the card game. So it's called The Curse of the... I'm going to slaughter this word. Rougarou? Is that where we landed on that?
I think
Yeah,
so.
that sounds
It's French. So, Rougarou.
right. Sounds better.
I'll just swallow my tongue a couple times and see what happens. Yeah, so it basically looks like a werewolf scenario, but based on what the article said, and we have these for Lord of the Rings too, so again, there's that precedent drink. This is a one-off scenario that is a self-contained encounter deck, and these tend to be a little bit more on the scathingly hard side since it's not part of an overall campaign, so the developers have no problem smashing our heads into the ground. So I'll be really excited to get a hold of this and see what that's about.
Yeah, and I know people are probably asking or wondering whether this is only at that event, but they did specify in the article that it will be released later to the general public, like they do with the Lord of the Rings scenarios. So
Drink.
Yeah, drink. So you will get a chance to play it even if you're not there, but the people at Arkham Knights will get the first stab at it. And also, as far as the kind of general release of the game, when we're like so far out in wanting information, you end up like parsing individual words. So the way they phrased it was that
so true.
This would be the first opportunity or first chance to buy the game. And for some reason, that makes me think that it's not going to be too long until the general release after Arkham Knights. Mm-hmm. Like if they would have said, oh, this is the early release, for some reason that would have made me think like it's going to be a longer wait. But I feel like it's gonna be maybe like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. But if I'm wrong on that, then don't send me hate mail.
Oh God, I'm already pre-registered for this, so I'm really stoked.
Very jealous.
Yeah.
I'm
So
wondering now
definitely-
if they're
I'm not gonna lie. I have a window open. I'm looking at flights right now.
nice.
Oh,
Let's
Tom.
do it.
I might have to be in your suitcase, Tom. I'm wondering if this is how they're gonna do it. If they are gonna do the special Arkham events at Arkham Nights for the LCG instead of at Gen Con. Because if it's 2 events, then it's gonna be hard for me to make both, or I'm gonna have to move to Minnesota. One of those 2.
That's an acceptable.
Yeah, I think that'll work.
Yeah, and for anyone who's wondering, Minnesota is actually beautiful during October. It's my favorite month as far as weather is concerned. So don't let that dissuade you. And definitely let me know via Discord, email, wherever you want to contact us via the Facebook if you're coming. Hopefully we can do a little bit of a meetup, maybe go out for some beers or food, whatever it happens to be after the event. So let me know if you're going to be there. Guys, I think that's the news, right? Anything else you guys wanted to touch?
Have we mentioned that we're excited yet?
The news site.
Because I'm excited.
So let's talk a little bit more. We've touched on it as we've gone through here just kind of organically, but we did want to discuss kind of somewhat more in depth the gameplay of Arkham Horror and kind of what we discovered through the Gen Con demo, and I guess what our thoughts and feelings on that are. So I think a good way to approach this is, Ian, like you said, you were able to get a snapshot of the rules cards that kind of walk through the round sequence. So I think this would be a good way to kind of walk through the structure of the game. We can talk about some of the cards that they've spoiled, and talk about how we feel they're going to play. So basically, setup for this game is going to be a lot like Lord of the Rings. Drink. We've got, you bring your own constructed deck, which is going to have your investigator, and then whatever your investigator requires for their deck building requirements on the back. We discussed Roland last time. I don't know if we've had any more investigator backs spoiled at this point, have we?
I don't think we
I know.
have.
We've
I
had
don't
card
think so.
spoilers, but I don't know if we know what the construction of each investigator's deck is going to be beyond Roland. So touching on that briefly again, it's 30 cards, not including his auto includes his cover up and 38 special and basic weakness. So 30 cards among Guardian cards, which is his own class, Seeker cards, which is kind of like his off class, and then neutral cards. So you bring in your own deck, and then you set up the Chaos Bag, like we mentioned earlier. Depending on what difficulty you're playing on, you're going to add a certain mix. So probably talk briefly about the standard mode, since I imagine that's what most people are going to be playing. So you've got a +1, a singleton +1. So you've got one good result, well, more or less, out of the whole bag, out of the numbers anyway. 2 zeros, 3 -1s, 2 -2s, a -3, a -4, 2 skulls, a cultist, is it a mountain? Is it a tablet?
Might
I
be a
think it's a
broken
tablet,
tablet. I don't know.
Okay, a tablet, tentacles, and an elder sign. So the numbers are pretty self-explanatory. We talked about skill tests. Those are going to modify whatever your skill is at before you resolve the test. The skulls, cultist, and tablet are going to be based on the scenario, so it sounds like they're also going to be generally negative modifiers, but they might do other things. The tentacle and the elder sign are going to be your auto fail and not auto win. It's kind of sad that we don't get perfect symmetry there. But if you pull the tentacle, you automatically fail whatever test you're doing. And then the elder sign is actually going to be governed based on the investigator that you have. When you guys have one of the investigators in front of you, you can talk about what the elder sign abilities are on them.
Sure. So Roland Banks has an Elder Sign effect that says +1 for each clue on your location. So yeah, if you pull the Elder Sign token and you're at a location that has maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 clues on it, that's going to give you a solid boost.
That seems pretty decent.
Wendy, on the other hand, her Elder Sign effect says +0. However, it also says if Wendy's amulet is in play, you automatically succeed instead. So there's your automatic success, at least in Wendy's case,
There it is.
provided you have her amulet in play. I think
She's got a fun way to dig for it.
Does she? Now you played.
I didn't.
You experienced this during your demo, right, John?
Right. Yes, I did not. I did not see her amulet in my game, sadly, and I pulled the freaking elder token or elder sign token twice.
Nicely done.
It's like, oh, but we did cover it earlier. Sometimes the best thing that happens to you when you roll the dice is nothing. So +0 is
that sounds like an on par experience for pretty much any Arkham horror game, I think. Nothing,
Yes.
thank God.
Yes. Oh God, it's okay. Nothing happened.
I think one of the things I like here is there's kind of a good blend of the mathiness and the random, because you know what the highest negative modifier is. So you could say
Yeah,
like
you can game it a bit.
Yeah, you can game it like, okay, I need to be 4 higher than the difficulty level. But the auto fail token is important because you can always fail, which you should be able to always fail in an Arkham game. Like there's nothing certain in the Arkham game. And at the
That sounds like a DM talking.
and at the same time, you probably need to have at least equal to the difficulty number, and hope you hit those zeros. There is the +1, so maybe you go uphill, but that's kind of
How often are you
going
to try to risk it and say, you know what, I need to get +1 on this.
Right.
Let's try to pull it.
Yep.
I think probably just in the absence of anything more useful to do. I can't remember. I think I had an investigate test that was kind of like that, where I'm like, all right, if I either get 0 or +1, I win, but otherwise I fail.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what else I'd do with this action right now, so let's roll the dice. And of course I failed.
Yep. And I like that, there's always the question of like how much of a game is skill versus luck. And of course, if I'm devoting like so much time to a game, which I plan on doing, I want there to be a healthy bit of skill. And I like what I've seen so far in playing the demo on this, that there are those kind of questions of like, of course you can game it and get 4 above each difficulty number if you're playing on standard mode to try to ensure success, but you're not going to have the cards to do that. So you're going to have to pick and choose, like, which ones am I going to go all in on and which do I just hope for the best, and how am I going to spend my icons.
Yeah, and I think that's the real resource management of this game, it seemed like. I never felt like I was poor in actual resources, and that might just be the character I was playing, because, she's a street urchin, so it would make sense. But I feel like that's what you're managing. You're managing those skill boosts. You're managing your health, I guess, and your sanity, and how you spend those. So yeah, no, I totally do agree though that the game needs a little bit of I don't know. I guess an element of the unknown. Otherwise, it just becomes so number crunchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after you've set up the game, you'll also set up the encounter deck, and that's going to be governed completely based on the scenario, I assume. So I'm sure the agenda is going to tell you how to set up the game and what location maybe starts in play, any enemies that start in play. You're going to assemble the encounter deck from the necessary encounter sets, and then get rolling. So talking about the round sequence here, the first round, which is actually somewhat counterintuitive here because it looks like you skip it during the actual first round of the game itself, is the Mythos phase. So Nick, you want to talk us through what happens during the Mythos phase?
Sure. So Mythos phase, the first thing you do is you place 1 Doom counter or Doom token on the agenda. So right off the bat, you're losing ground.
Tick-tock.
Yeah. The next thing you do is you advance the agenda if the Doom threshold is satisfied. And finally, each investigator draws 1 card from the top of the encounter deck.
So that's essentially that's the encounter deck's turn. So they get to advance their agenda. The Doom threshold is interesting because obviously you're putting Doom on the agenda, but as we've seen, and I actually think we got one of these dudes in our game or our demo.
We did, yeah.
Ian, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a cultist that came into play, and when he popped into play as a revelation effect, he got a Doom token. So there's this cultist kind of in the background.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. There's this cultist in the background of everything, just hurrying along the encounter deck's plans and making things just generally terrible for you. So that's pretty cool, actually. I like that it's not static, that it's just the agenda that's the only thing that's ever going to, ekingly grab these Doom tokens. That there are other effects that can be unexpected, and the encounter deck can hit you from behind when you're not expecting it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in all of Fantasy Flight's card games, they've kind of showed that they're willing and that they go through different routes to accomplish kind of the same thing. So even though you're used to things happening in a certain way or coming from a certain part of the game, they will kind of flip that on its head at some point, and they're doing that right away with this, with enemies that will advance Doom. One thing that comes to mind for me with the Star Wars LCG, I'm going to reference a different card game, guys, a different one, not Lord of the Rings, but with Star Wars.
All right, spit the drink back up.
Yeah, with Star Wars, there was the Death Star dial, which was like your counter. But there was a card in the core set that would allow a player to actually attack the Death Star dial, which was something that I never would have thought of. Like
that's the trench run.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was so like that. So this is kind of like that, where there's other things that are going to affect the Doom counters outside of just the whole Mythos phase and the token add 1 at the start of the turn.
Yep. And the other thing that I think is really cool, that each investigator draws 1 card from the top of the encounter deck. It also, and this is more of a pragmatic thing, so playing games like Lord of the Rings or Sentinels of the Multiverse, where cards are coming off of the AI deck more or less, it can kind of be a thing where one person kind of ends up quarterbacking the encounter deck, and what that does at the table is that when that's happening, everyone else can tend to kind of check out if they're not actively engaged. But making it so that each investigator draws an encounter card, it keeps everyone engaged. You only have probably a little bit of time before you need to be paying attention to something terrible happening to you again. So beyond the actual gameplay implications of this, I like what that's going to do kind of at the actual table.
Yeah, that's a big problem in role-playing games, is engagement between actions. But Sean, if we're playing a game and that encounter deck is closer to you, I'll probably just have you draw it for me. Like, seriously.
I'll throw the card.
I have to be checking Facebook at some time, man.
So that's the Mythos phase. Ian, you want to walk us through the investigation phase?
Sure, let me scrolling. Finding it. Scroll. There it is. Investigation phase is very simple, and also very complex. It's very simple because all you're doing is each investigator takes a turn to perform 3 actions. On the flip side of the little round sequence card, which we had access to during the demo, is the actions you can take. So you can spend an action to either draw 1 card or gain 1 resource, which is nice because you will always have card draw or resource generation available if you want it, if you're willing to spend an action. You have to spend an action to play an event or asset card from hand, except for cards with the fast little keyword on it do not cost an action to play because they're fast. You can activate an ability on a card that has the little arrow symbol, which tells you it costs an action. You can move. You can investigate your location, which is basically doing a skill test of your intellect against what is called the shroud of that location. And finally, you can fight an enemy or engage an enemy that's at your location. Oh, I missed one. And you can try to evade or run away from an enemy like we talked about before.
Run away!
Game over, man.
Yeah, no, Ian, you did touch on it, but I love the fact that you can, at will, draw a card, gain a resource. There are certain games out there that you basically have to have an effect in play in order to draw a card or gain a resource, and sometimes you just need that little bit. You're digging for that card, or you need 1 more resource to play the bomb card in your hand, and I like that it gives you that default option. It also sets kind of the basis of the economy of the game, right? Because kind of at its simplest, each card or each resource is worth more or less an action, and anything more efficient than that, you can kind of weigh against that baseline.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Now, something that I did want to point out is that it also costs an action to play an event or asset card. Now, that's something that I know is going to trip me up the first couple of games because I'm not used to spending an action just to play a card. But I think that's pretty interesting because that also dictates the value of playing a card, and that can kind of that's another economy aspect of the game. And kind of along those lines,
action economy is going to be a real thing.
Huge. And moreover, one thing that I neglected to talk about in the first article that I went over is that your investigators have like inventory slots. So you can't just play asset cards and ally cards kind of, willy-nilly. You actually have a limited number of slots to use. So this kind of goes back to the developers talking about how this card game is trying to straddle between a traditional card game and an RPG. And we've seen a little bit about how they're injecting a lot of story into this game, and I think that's fantastic. But it's really kind of cool to see how they're incorporating some other traditional role-playing game mechanics into this as well. So you as an investigator have one body slot, you have 2 hand slots, you have an accessory slot, slots for arcane, abilities or effects, and then you have 1 ally slot. So anytime you're putting down, an asset to your character, you have to kind of weigh, is this going to, do I want to replace what I currently have, or can I use this card in a different way? And that also brings up deck building, because when you're building your deck, you don't want to just put all sorts of allies in the deck because you only have 1 slot for that kind of thing.
And I also like how it sets it apart from kind of the standard Magic template, right? Where it's like, I have guys, you have guys, we turn them sideways and mash them together.
Yeah.
Where, when you've got metered actions, you've got, basically a board with the locations. I feel like it's done a really good job to actually differentiate itself in that way.
I feel like the action system it sounds weird, but is what is most excites me about the game. Like, I like that system in Netrunner, even though I'm not like a big Netrunner player. I've at least played the core set, and I that was a good aspect of that game. And I like that they're bringing it into this cooperative environment, because it does give that RPG feel of like, I'm here, and what do I need to do? Do I need to try to explore more? Am I trying to like search the room for clues? Am I trying to, in my mind, if I was playing a gun, that could be like I searched the room and found a gun in a drawer or something. Like, that's what in my headcanon might be. And it also, I'm going to talk about another game for a second, because a lot of listeners after the first episode were mentioning, like, why didn't we mention Pathfinder Adventure card game?
Yes. Yes, more than a few, and I blame you, Ian.
Yeah, but the blame does go on me, because I believe I'm the only one who has played it. Is that true?
It's correct. I haven't played it, so.
Okay, yeah, so the blame falls on me. One of the reasons I didn't...
Get him!
Yeah, I can see the pitchforks from my window right now. But there's a few reasons I didn't bring it up. One is because I wanted kind of a good chance to talk about the differences. And when we were talking about kind of the leveling up aspect, and I feel like the Arkham game is still breaking new ground, because this is leveling up in kind of a CCG or LCG. I don't know what the word is for a game where you're kind of building a deck beforehand.
Constructed.
Like a constructed game. Whereas Pathfinder Adventure card game, you do kind of build. How it works is you do kind of build a deck at the very beginning, but it's very limited. So you choose a class, like maybe you're a paladin or a fighter, and on the back it says, okay, you have 2 weapons in your deck, 3 spells, 1 armor, and then you choose from a very limited set of cards to build your deck. And then you find other cards throughout the course of your adventures, which kind of make you more powerful. So it should get credit as kind of being the first card game that I know of that introduced leveling up between different scenarios, but it didn't feel like a constructed game to me, because the deck building is so limited in that way, that it feels almost like a deck builder where you're building a deck in the course of a game.
Almost more like Thunderstone or something like that.
Yeah, very much in that line, except for that you can kind of do some leveling up between quests. Like, you might earn a reward where you can like choose a special item or something.
Okay.
Anyway, the reason I brought it up here is because playing this demo, I already like this game about 5,000 times more than Pathfinder Adventure card game. Not to crap on that
Shots
game
fired.
for those of you who enjoy it, but there is some fun to that game. But the problem for me with that game is it feels like as if you took an RPG and took everything out of it except for rolling dice for skill checks. And so you're essentially, how that game works is you move from locations. Each location has a deck. You draw a card and maybe a monster and maybe a trap, and it says roll a dice against the number. And that's basically the game. And here it feels, because of the action system, which is why I'm bringing up Pathfinder here, makes this game feel so much more robust, because you're choosing 3 actions each turn from all these different things you can do. Whereas Pathfinder, I feel like it comes down to draw a card, roll a number, draw a card, roll a number, and that's your turns. So all that is to say is, if you have been interested in Pathfinder and didn't find that it was your bag, you will like this game. I think you will like it a lot better.
Yeah, one of the things that is really a big draw with tabletop role-playing games is just the freedom of choice. And definitely when you're looking at the turn structure for each investigator, the structure of your turn is pretty much up to you within these, these limitations. But it's not like, okay, now I draw a card, now I add a resource, now I can play things, now I can do that. It's no, you pick 3, any 3, and do whatever you need to do at that time. So yeah, that definitely emulates that tabletop RPG feel, and I can't wait to actually sit down and give this a try.
I also want to mention that for the investigation phase, there's no starting player and then you go around the table. Is when you get each round, you can choose who goes when, which again I think offers a lot of flexibility for how you want to tackle whatever situation you find yourself in.
Yeah, and it's also really cool that you can, player order can matter if you're playing with multiple people. Like, hey, you go evade that enemy first, so I can pop in with my gun and cap it. and not having a set we go clockwise around the table in player order, leaves you that tactical strategy open.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Fantasy Flight's Star Wars RPG. How traditional RPGs, you roll your initiative and then that kind of determines the sequence. But in Star Wars RPG, you do roll initiative, but you're just getting slots for characters. And
they're
so then
general player slots.
Whenever a player or character slot activates, you guys can discuss as a group. All right, who should go right now? Who can offer the best benefit for this scenario? And I really like that. Yeah,
and the few times that I've played Edge of the Empire, which is when that has come up, there was no discussion. It was just like, all right, player slot. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna shoot my gun at this guy. You guys do whatever you want after that. I don't care. So, and you could probably do that here too, because you can't split up actions. So it's like once one investigator starts, he has to finish. So I could totally play that card here too and be like, okay, guys, whoever wants to, no, I'm gonna play a card now. I have to finish my turn,
Just steal the lead investigator token. Which I actually don't know is a thing. I bought one assuming that would be a common element between this and Eldritch, but it kind of looks like that might actually not be a thing. So
yeah, I don't remember one at the demo. Yeah.
Okay, so that covers the investigator phase pretty well, I think. We're going to be talking, obviously, a lot more since that's where most of the game is going to get played. But moving on then, Tom, you already touched on it through the article a bit, but you want to run us through the enemy phase and what happens there?
Sure. So the enemy phase has 2 steps. Step 1 is enemies with the hunter keyword move toward the nearest investigator. And then secondly, each engaged enemy attacks if able.
The order of those, I feel, is really important.
Yes.
Because hunters, anything with the hunter keyword, you're going to have to be aware of how close it is to you, because it moves, then it attacks.
So refresh me. Actually, I'm still trying to understand. If you're in a location and an enemy with a hunter keyword is in an adjacent location and it moves to you, does he immediately engage you when you are in the same location?
Yeah. So my understanding from our demo was that if it's ready and in a location, it's going to engage.
Okay.
And it will engage its prey first, and then I think it's player choice if there's a tie or it's otherwise ambiguous.
Got
if
it.
that makes. And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier too, but getting back to the investigation phase, if you're engaged with an enemy and spend an action to do anything other than a fight, evade, or parlay or resign ability, just throw in the towel. Each engaged enemy each enemy engaged with you makes an attack of opportunity. So that kind of plays into the enemy phase as well. So again, anything exhausted basically doesn't trigger. So I'm pretty sure. I might have to double check this once we actually get our hands on the
Seems
rules.
reasonable.
But I think if you've managed to exhaust a hunter enemy, I don't think it's going to move. But it might be that it moves, it just doesn't engage. So that remains to be seen. But so this is kind of, and the reason I bring that up, this kind of seems to be the mover around which you're kind of gauging each enemy's threat to you, right? So this is their opportunity that they're going to get if you don't do something to hedge against it to attack you. So anything that you're doing to try to mitigate your enemy, you're kind of keeping the enemy phase in mind and what the enemy is going to do during that phase, when you're making your plans. Now, one other thing that I wanted to touch on is obviously the upkeep phase. It's the last phase of the game here, where you reset actions. And it says in parentheses here, flip mini cards, which I believe are going to be the mini investigator cards, which are color on one side and black and white on the other, which I thought was pretty cool as a way to show that you've done your turn.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned that much because that was actually something that surprised me when I first played. Is that as an investigator, you have a little card that represents you, and there's different locations out on the table, and so you move your card around to represent which location you're at. And once you take all of your actions for your turn, you flip that card face down, and as Sean mentioned, it's black and white, so you said that indicates you've exhausted your turn.
Mm-hmm. I actually really like that, too. The one downside to it is I'm going to have to buy different sized sleeves every time a new investigator comes out.
I think.
Why don't you just forego the sleeves, Sean, and just buy miniatures?
I was just gonna say, I think I'm gonna get miniatures because the idea of like trying to pick that little mini card off of the other card on the tabletop is just when my finger has the condensation of my drink and everything on it. Like I don't like playing. I'm gonna get a mini and use that card like on my play area just to show ready or turn used.
Oh yeah, God. That moment where you reach over and you get just a fingernail's worth of purchase on the card and it flips down. It's like,
yeah, and then you're doing that for the next 5 minutes and everybody's waiting for you. Yeah.
Just staring. I know FFG does have Arkham Horror Investigator minis, or they did, and if you look at the store now, you'll see that some of them are still available and some are not. They're kind of gone out of print. So I'm really curious.
I imagine they're going to be in really high demand with Mansions of Madness coming back out.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see if they will reissue those or make them available, which they definitely should, because there will be the interest for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so after you flip your mini cards and reset all actions, you ready all exhausted cards, and I think that means at this point that any enemies that ready then auto-engage. At least that's my interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the timing structure might change that. And then each investigator draws a card and gains a resource. So that's kind of your baseline for your card draw and your resource. You're going to get an auto 1/1 each turn. And then each investigator checks their hand size, which appears to be at a default of 8. So if you have more than 8 cards in your hand, you discard down until you have 8. Which wasn't an issue for me during our demo, but I imagine as we continue to get card draw effects, it might actually become a thing down the road.
Well, and I think the fact that you can ditch cards to boost skill tests, I mean, that right there is an incentive to clean through your deck. So.
Yeah. Especially if you're sitting at 9 cards, you're like, okay, someone do an investigate action please, so I can chuck this one, and it's not just wasted. So yeah, I think that definitely will help. It kind of seems like hand size is not, or at least hand and draw and all that sort of thing, maybe at least out of the gate isn't going to be as kind of card gamey as other games are.
Yeah, between the hand size limit and the action system, it's actually really hard for me to picture these kind of broken combos existing that have popped up in Lord of the Rings Drink a few times. And obviously in other competitive card games where they constantly have to issue errata or ban cards
to break infinite loops.
Maybe there's a way that happens in this game, but it's hard to see how it would happen with the way things are kind of limited. So I feel like they've done their due diligence here to stop that from happening.
Absolutely. So between the action metering, which I think makes every decision matter more, which is awesome, and then between that and the slot, the inventory slots where you can't build an army and worthy of Mordor and truck out 5 allies against all these enemies. You're limited to 1. You've got limited hand slots. I feel like survival horror is always best when you feel like you just barely don't have enough resources, ammo, whatever it happens to be.
Reminds me of like the old Resident Evil games.
Yes,
Oh yes,
exactly.
yeah. Finding those damn bullets.
What are you buying?
What are you selling? I stranger. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Ian. I think that's a really cool way to keep things limited but still open and interesting, and limit kind of the really card gamey type shenanigans that tend to, I don't know, tend to dominate other games. Based on the Netrunner precedent, I guess, the one place they're gonna have to be careful is with the free abilities, because that's where kind of the linking and chaining shenanigans can get out of hand. So as long as they're careful with what they allow the free abilities to do and combo with, and require that anything big and powerful and splashy requires you to spend an action to do it, I think we should be pretty safe. But time will tell.
We just got to make sure we don't invite C-Stan, the community member, to our game.
Oh man, I really want to crack his brain open and see how that thing's wired. Like the stuff that he sees, I'm like, oh my god, I've played this card game for 4 years and I never even read that card properly. Apparently, I'm sure we'll have those in this community as well.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the basic turn structure of the game. So now that we've kind of covered, at least on the higher level, what the game's about, I really want to talk some spoilers. Can we talk spoilers? We're going to spoil some cards?
Let's do it.
All right. Nick, it's probably, I know we've kind of already covered most of them at this point, but it's probably appropriate to give you our first investigator here, considering you've gone ahead and named your first/second child after him. So go ahead and spoil.
Yeah,
our guardian here.
I was so excited for Roland Banks that before I even knew this game existed, I'm like, there's probably going to be a pretty cool Roland in a card game sometime, so I'm going to name my son Roland. So our first investigator is Roland Banks, the Fed, as his subtitle is. He is that's Guardian class, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The blue shield.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah, that's what the article said, right? Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna say tank.
Yeah, there you go. He's got 3 willpower, 3 intellect, 4 ass kicking, and 2 Hermes. Agency and detective traits. That was fight and agility, in case you weren't paying attention earlier. He has response. That's a response action, correct? I forget these symbols.
Yeah, the little loop, I believe, is a response.
Okay, so response. After you defeat an enemy, discover 1 clue at your location, limit once per round. So he's definitely, as Sean said, the one who wants to be taking the monsters out, if and when you can. And then and
it's cool action advantage.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, finish the card. I won't.
You're fine.
I got excited. I'm sorry.
He's got the Elder Sign effect. So when you draw an Elder Sign from the Chaos bag, he gives you +1 to your skill check for each clue on your current location. So totally random, but if anything, it's going to be a whiff. At minimum, it's going to be a whiff, which, as we discussed, is usually preferable to your other options. And then he's got 9 health and 5 sanity, so 5 horror is the most he can take for that. So pretty solid first investigator. I like when they give us the practical, the kind of like the warrior type characters up front, because that's usually the ones I gravitate to immediately in a new game. So
yeah, and talking quickly about his reaction ability, and like I mentioned in my demo earlier, the Elder Sign is 1 out of 16 tokens in standard mode, maybe even more diluted if we're adding additional tokens down the line. I feel like as we look at these investigators, the Elder Sign effect is always going to be cool, but I don't know how much value I'm going to place on it personally when I'm looking at the value of an investigator, because it is so like, I'm not going to choose this guy based on what he does when he crits, right?
Right.
But his reaction ability seems like it's going to trigger all the time, and it's really good action advantage. It's good stat advantage, too, because you don't have to chuck cards for investigating. So you're defeating enemies, which presumably you're going to be doing anyway with this class, and you're discovering clues while you do it. So that seems ultra solid, and it's really cool. It just seems like a Fed, right?
Yeah.
Flavorful as hell.
Yeah, I feel like anything that gives you action advantage in this game, like extra actions or kind of 2-for-1 type deals, are going to be super crucial. Like, especially for solo, if you don't have anyone else to do stuff, like, each of those actions is probably going to be super important. And by the way, I crunched the numbers
If you're
real
soloing
quick.
with Roland, you're gonna.
So one out of 16, one token out of 16 is actually about 6%. So assuming everything is nice and random, you can't really rely on that Elder Sign ability.
Yeah, that seems pretty standard for like a crit rate. You know.
Yeah, that actually is pretty close. It's a little better than your natural 20s. So I say go for it. I say build your character around that.
All in.
Well, it's also interesting because the better you're doing, the less that Elder Sign effect does for you, right? So if you're on top of it and you're investigating locations and you're killing enemies and getting clues, then it's not doing it. But if you're behind and you're just stuck on this location with 4 clues and then you pull the Elder Sign, that's going to be.
I didn't think about that, but that's a very important thing to note. Is that it's a catch-up. Like it's a very strong catch-up mechanic, and that I think those are worth a lot more than the win more mechanics as can happen otherwise.
Yes. Or the what are you doing kind of mechanics, like what's happening here. I don't know what this is accomplishing. So it's not on the card here, but we did talk about Roland's deck building basically requirements. It sounds like he can obviously dip into neutral cards, but he can also dip into seeker cards, which to me that's so perfect. Like he's a detective. He's a guardian and a seeker, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the perfect cross class. All right, Ian, do you wanna spoil Wendy?
Sure. So Wendy Adams is the urchin. She has the red, it looks like an eagle or bird of some kind, I believe, which is the survivor class.
I'm gonna go with a raven.
Yeah, raven would be fitting, it seems like. So we'll go with red raven.
Yes.
So 4 willpower, 3 intellect, 1 combat, 4 agility. So she cannot fight well, which makes sense. She's just a little urchin, but she is very fleet of foot and can run away. She has the drifter keyword. Looks like it's a responsibility that when you reveal a chaos token, choose and discard 1 card from your hand. So you can cancel that chaos token that you just drew, throw it back in the bag, and try again. So essentially a token mulligan for the cost of discarding 1 card from your hand.
That
amazing.
seems so good.
Yeah, well, it seems as if the central mechanic of the game is drawing a token from a bag. Anything that gives you a do-over should be pretty powerful, I think.
Well, and it's
Sure.
important to note on that ability, too, that not only is it once per test or ability, but it's also you put that token back in the bag first,
Yes.
and then you redraw. So you could get that one again. I think that's very important to note.
I feel like the
Don't
chance
ignore
of
Eleanor, guys.
redrawing that same token is lurking somewhere around 90%, probably. I think that's
Definitely.
mathematically correct.
The math
I feel
checks
like
out.
I feel like when Octagon eventually gets implemented for this game, someone's going to be questioning the algorithm on the redraws constantly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're always going to redraw that same one. So she has an Elder Sign effect. I think we talked about this before, but +0. If she has the amulet in play, you automatically succeed. And she has a nice balance, 7 health and 7 sanity.
One thing to note here between these two investigators is that their stats both equal out to 12 total, and their pools, their health and sanity, both equal out to 14. So kind of a nice barometer to compare future investigators with.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be cool to see if it sticks to that baseline or if they maybe give someone a little bit more health and sanity, but a weaker ability or something along those lines. But definitely a good baseline.
Yeah, Wendy seems
moving-
really solid to me. Like, just that redraw ability and kind of balance health and sanity. I mean, she can't fight well, but I don't know. I
She
feel
can run
like
away, though.
he might be able to get
She
around
pulled
it.
weight in our game.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do like that she's kind of got everything but combat. She's at least decent at it, right? Three seems pretty solid for a stat. That's kind of like your, hey, I do this decently well. Not great, but passable. 4 to me seems like this is my specialty kind of stat.
Mm-hmm.
So, but and again, getting back to the fact that you don't need to be good at combat to play the game. I love that about the design, and I like the idea that she can just kind of be this little skirty, tricksy, quick escape the enemy, and then let someone with a little bit more clout in combat come in and finish it off. Type character.
Well, and just looking at,
I appreciate that. That's actually a viable strategy, clearly straight out of the box.
And just looking at, and again, I haven't played the game like you two have, but between these two characters, Roland looks like he's going to be probably the more stable character. He's probably going to be a little bit more like every turn's going to, depending again on the encounter deck, but every turn's going to be more or less kind of the same with him. Whereas with Wendy, she's going to be a bit more of a gamble, and when you go into the game, her turns are going to fluctuate, the actions that you perform, what you can do and when and where, and that sort of thing. So,
might be a little bit more of a utility player where it comes to non-combat things.
Sure.
Especially since and it's kind of hard because her response doesn't technically modify her stats, but it totally does, right? Because the chaos token that you pull modifies her stats. So if you get a -4 and you're able to chuck that back in and get a -1, like, that's huge. That's stat advantage right there, just by virtue of modifying the chaos bag. So even though her stats kind of seem a little bit standard across the board, except for combat, that you also have to take that into account, that she can just straight up say, no, I'd rather see another one right here. I feel like she gets better the more card draw we have to keep that ability going.
Oh, definitely. So now, Sean, you played Wendy at the demo, correct?
Did
you ever
yes.
have a turn where you're just like, all 3 actions, draw 3 cards? Like, I need to fill this hand back up. Just boom, 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 take 3 cards. Did you ever do that?
No, it wasn't too bad. I don't know if I got lucky. Like I said, I pulled 2 Elder Signs throughout the game, so I got a couple zeros, I got a couple -1s. I think I only ended up failing like 1 investigate test, and then the rest of it was evading enemies and exploring locations. So yeah, I didn't have to fill up that game, but I imagine if you're going heavy, or maybe even if you're soloing with Wendy and you're kind of trying to do everything, you might get a little heavy on that discard and have to draw back up at some point. I can see your hand
emptying pretty quick. Yeah.
So moving right along, Tom. Technically, it's your turn, but I'm going to go ahead and take this one because it's a purple card, and I have a feeling that this is going to be my faction. So
Do you
we
know what
have
that class is called?
I believe. Do we? Is it Mystic?
It is Mystic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember now because the subreddit has added class flair, and I've already thrown in with the Mystics. So we've got a Holy Rosary, which is an asset, 2 cost, item and charm traits. It has 1 willpower pip, and static ability here. You get +1 willpower. It is a trinket. Is that what the necklace is?
I think it's an accessory.
Accessory.
Yeah.
It gives you 2, and then it also has 2 sanity.
Does that give you 2 sanity to your character?
Yeah. Okay. So talking about this is kind of one of the interesting parts about the game. I was able to get an ally down in the demo, like I was talking about. So basically, some assets are going to have health or sanity markers, and anytime you take health or sanity damage, you can, instead of your investigator card, you can choose to place any number of those tokens on assets that you control. And it sounded like and basically each asset has its own life, right? So this gives you 2 sanity. Once you've put 2 horror on it, it's going to go away. So just like allies, if they take damage equal to their health, they die and they're going to go away. So it's a cool way to enhance your character, but also still leave the encounter deck way to tax your board state. Because if it gets to the point where your investigator is getting maxed out and you're avoiding losing your accessories or allies or whatever it happens to be, then the encounter deck can put the pressure on and start actually pinging away at your board. So now, +1 willpower from a Holy Rosary. I mean, this just seems like good anti-horror tech, right?
Oh, definitely.
Seems reasonable.
That's pretty much all it is, right? Obviously, it can help you out in your willpower tests, which seem to be your stat that's tied most to things that would cause you horror. I'm trying to remember. Was Dissonant Voices a horror check, Ian? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I believe it was. It seems like a lot of the treachery cards
Or a willpower check.
seem to do willpower checks, so I have a feeling like the willpower is gonna play a part. And like
Dissonant Voices, actually, I have it up in front of me here. It just says forced at the end of the round, discard Dissonant Voices. So that's an example of a treachery that just it stays with you for a round and does its effect, but then goes away on its own accord.
It was that other one. That
was
I
it
read
Frozen by
earlier.
Fear then?
Yeah, Frozen by Fear. That was the one. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, I mean you've got a way to soak some horror. You've got a nice boost to your willpower test. Obviously, you've got the willpower pip there. If you've maybe already have one in play or you don't have the accessory slot open, you have that option. I feel like this is probably just a really good baseline, cheap willpower increase.
Oh, definitely.
So
yeah, I feel like I
looking
don't
forward to
have a
playing around
good
with that.
sense right now, just from playing the demo, of how to judge kind of the resource costs of cards yet. Because you start with 5, and they seem kind of plentiful at first, so it's kind of hard to tell, like, is too expensive or not at this point. I guess we'll find out as we go along.
Yep, I would agree. I have no idea exactly how expensive this is compared to. Don't know if I saw anything else that increases your sanity or willpower, so I have no idea if there's something to compare it to.
Well, and also looking at okay, so we have your assets have health basically. Treacheries have a mechanic in them to get rid of themselves. I think the subtitle for Arkham Horror the LCG could be "Everything is Temporary."
And don't make plans.
Yeah.
I feel like every card game could just be called, "Oh crap, I had plans." All right, so then moving right along, Tom, do you want to walk us through Hyper Awareness?
Yeah.
I love that art, by the way.
beautiful.
It's pretty sweet.
She's like in Cerebro or something.
So Hyper Awareness is a Seeker card. Is that right? With a
I believe that.
Cost of 2. It's an asset. And it has an intellect icon and an agility icon. And it has the talent trait. Now, it has 2 abilities here. And do we know what this lightning bolt symbol is called? Because I forget. Because I do not have the rulebook in front of me.
I believe...
Yes.
I think it's an action that doesn't cost an action.
Yeah, it's an ability that doesn't cost an action. But so the first one says, spend 1 resource. You get +1 intellect for this skill test. And the next one says, spend 1 resource. You get +1 agility for this skill test. So, and it's kind of a flexible card you can use for different types of skill tests as long as you have the resources to boost it.
And it seems like...
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I also wanted to point out that this card is it's a talent, or it does not fill up an inventory slot on your character. So theoretically, you could have here's a card type that you could have multiples of, or you could have a bunch of cards that don't fill up inventory slots. So those are kind of valuable in their own right.
Yep. And the ability to keep some resources around and just go all in on a big test that super matters. I like that you have that flexibility. Also, it'll be interesting to see. So this is a Seeker card. It makes sense that Intellect would be one of the boosts that it gives, because it seems like that's something Seekers would be decent at. Then it's also going to give an Agility boost, so a little bit of a help for those types of characters who maybe just want to investigate then run away. Also want to point out, and this is completely tangential, the illustrator for this is Aurore Fulni, who recently, and by recently I mean this morning, Cardboard of the Rings had the opportunity to interview. She recently did the art for the Gen Con promo, the big alternate art Boromir that everyone was drooling over for the past little bit.
Which looks amazing.
Yes, it really, really does. So if you're at all interested in getting in the head of an artist, pop over to the next Cardboard of the Rings episode, and that should be on there.
And drink.
we just need a bell to go off.
I think...
Yeah.
I think when I mentioned Cardboard of the Rings, we have to take shots.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, so moving right along, Nick, I believe that makes it your turn. We've got a magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass, yes. One cost asset, seeker asset, and it has one intellect icon. It's an item and tool. Those are its traits. It is fast, so this can be played without using an action. And it has the text, you get +1 intellect while investigating, and then it takes up one of your hand slots. So definitely seems like something that you kind of want to hang on to until you need it, either for its ability or, again, just for the intellect skill icon.
I also have to point out this art is creeping me
Oh,
out.
the art is...
Yeah. He's like found the tick from hell.
Yeah.
It looks like someone just looking in their backyard, and then it's like some random like Cthulhu demon spawn. Like,
and we sell the house now.
I feel like this card is really good just in a vacuum. I mean, it's one, so I can say that's probably cheap. It's one resource to play. Mm-hmm. And it's giving you +1 to intellect, which is like the basic thing you're doing in the game is gathering clues. So maybe the worst part about it is that it takes up a hand slot.
That's
So that's actually my question. So it seems like the point of this is to keep it in your hand until you think you need it. Probably not play it as an action since it's fast, because that's wasting an action essentially. What happens if you already have 2 hand slots and you deem it necessary to play this card? It pops into play. You think you probably just discard one of your other items?
I think that's how it goes, yeah.
It would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the flexibility of it, because you could play this as a normal card, but I guess why would you? Never play this as a normal card, guys. That's what I'm saying. All right. Moving right along. Ian, you want to tell us about the encyclopedia?
Sure. So the encyclopedia, also a Seeker card, like you said, it's 2 cost. Of note is that it has these 2 little dots by the cost, which I believe it was the first article, or maybe the second, that pointed out these are the kind of lets you know how much experience it costs to add it to your deck.
Yes, it's a level 2 card.
So this is a level 2 inside. So this is like the encyclopedia you had to order away from in mail order when you were a kid back in the 80s,
Britannica?
early 90s. Yeah, the Britannica. This is like the advanced set you have to order for.
For 6 easy payments of $59.95 plus shipping and handling.
Yeah, exactly. It has 1 question mark, which is like basically you can use it for anything, for any skill test. Wild card is always good. It has the item and tome traits. It has the little arrow, which we know means it costs an action to do this. So you spend an action and exhaust encyclopedia, choose an investigator at your location, which based on the wording seems to me that you probably can choose yourself, I'm guessing, because it just says choose an investigator.
Otherwise this becomes unplayable and so
right. That investigator gets +2 to a skill of your choice until the end of the phase. Also key that it's until the end of the phase. So it will last the whole investigator phase, however many actions that investigator's taking.
Seems solid. We were just talking about how skill tests kind of make the world go round in this game. Mm-hmm. If you've got something big, really this could turn your non-fighter into a decent fighter. This could put you over the top on an investigate test that you really need to hit. Seems like a decently flexible card.
Mm-hmm.
It also does eat up a hand slot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've seen the things, right? There's like 60 books.
Those books are heavy.
I mean, the book and the illustration is friggin' massive as well. I think you need 2 hands for that at least.
I'm just picturing her like the person in the portrait, like carrying around with those little like teacher carts just filled with these encyclopedias, just like rolling those things around.
It's got its own card catalog. For your younger people out there, that's how we used to find books. So moving right along then, Tom, I believe we're up to you. You want to talk to us about the next card?
Yeah, so this next card is called Perception. It's a skill. It does not have a resource cost, but it does have 2 intellect icons. It has the practiced trait, and it says max 1 committed per skill test. If this test is successful, draw 1 card. Now, these skill cards, this is not something you play on the table next to your investigator like the other asset cards. Instead, you just are using these when you make a skill test. You can choose to discard a skill card to use its icons to help you in your test. And by using this card, it has an added benefit: is if you pass the test, you get to draw a card, so you get a little card action, a card advantage out of it. Or as Sean will tell you, a cantrip.
It is a cantrip. So what's really cool about this, and I can't remember if any of the other ones have been officially spoiled, so I don't think we have them here, but I remember in my demo I also had the another one that I can't even remember what it was. I think it might have been like spatial awareness or something like that did basically the same thing for agility. So it seems like, at least in the core set, we're going to have a set of these practiced skills, which I love how they tied in the trait with what kind of their function is. We're going to have these practiced skills for each stat, which are these neutral cards that basically +2, if successful, draw a card. Which to me they seem pretty auto-including, right? For at least for the stats that you know you're going to be using, because why not?
Yeah, it's that draw a card that sets them like that. That draw a card, I think, is what makes them an auto-include. Like you're going to need those two intellect skill icons for sure. But the fact that if I beat this test, then I get to draw another card and it replaces itself. Like that's. I have a feeling that these are going to be the baseline from which future ones will then be compared to.
Like if this were a normal card, I would be making a passionate argument about how drawing a card reduces the cost of the card, but this card doesn't cost anything, so it's just like all benefit. So seems good.
Yeah,
seems good.
Because I mean, the disadvantage of committing cards to the skill test is obviously you're draining your hand of options when you're doing so, unless it's just stuff you don't need, and this replaces itself, so it counterbalances it. Yeah, so definitely seems like this kind of like cycle of cards of these skills are going to be auto-includes. I'm really interested to see how the deck building will shake out. Maybe that'll be a later
what the
episode.
mix looks like.
Yeah, as we get more info. Because I'm curious how much of your deck are you going to devote to these skill cards, which aren't doing anything to build up your character, but on the other hand seem so crucial to passing skill tests.
Yep, I'm very, very interested to see if the game ends up kind of having a basic mix of the different cards, or whether that's going to vary based on your investigator, or what you know, if you're specializing in investigating versus fighting or something like that. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I love deck building, so that kind of stuff just really gets me slabbering. So right along those same lines, the next card we have here is Unexpected Courage, which is a wonderful, wonderful little reference to Lord of the Rings. It's a key card in that card pool, but obviously the theme of it can pretty much apply anywhere. It's another skill card. It is innate traded and max 1 committed per skill test, and has 2 wild skill pips. So essentially, you can use this on any type of test, and it gives you +2 to that test.
Seems good.
Which, seems pretty okay.
Yeah. So comparing it to Perception, the one we just talked about, it does not replace itself if you have a successful test. So you don't get to draw a card off of this one, but the added value is you can use it for any skill test.
Yep.
I think that I think Unexpected Courage is actually more of an auto-include than those specific ones, and that you're going to want Unexpected Courage probably in every deck you build. Like, I don't see a reason not to put this in every single deck you make.
Well, here's hoping we get like 4 of them in a core set then.
Yeah. Otherwise,
inside the box is an envelope filled with extra Unexpected Courages.
Otherwise, you'll see some
would they be
unexpected
courages then.
Yeah, Unexpected Courage black markets will pop up on eBay. Otherwise,
yeah. So skills, I am really interested to see, of your 30 cards, you think you're gonna slot in like 5 or 6? You're gonna slot in like 10? Super excited to see exactly how much weight these pull. And I imagine, like we talked about earlier, these are actually going to matter more in multiplayer, because you have more targets for using it, right? And more open-endedness, more flexibility generally means more utility. So.
Oh, definitely.
So then moving on from here, Nick, you want to talk about this really beefy-looking asset?
Sure, this is Leo De Luca, the Louisiana Lion.
So much alliteration.
Yeah.
He is a 6-cost asset. Now, I don't know that faction symbol.
That is the rogues.
Rogue, thank you. So he's a 6-cost asset rogue. He has 1 intellect skill icon. He has the ally and criminal traits. His text is, you may take an additional action during your turn. So we see why he costs 6. He has 2 health and 2 sanity, so he is just as sane as a holy rosary. And he takes up 1 ally slot.
I do like his flavor text, which is, I was born in Mississippi, Louisiana just sounded better. Well, you can get some good alliteration. I don't know, you'd be like Mississippi Manatee or...
Not as intimidating.
Yeah, totally not.
I have a feeling there are very few moonshine runners out there named after the sea cow.
The slow ones, maybe.
So, talking about him, an extra action each turn, that's a 33.33 repeated increase in your action productivity, which seems okay.
Yeah.
6 is the highest cost I've seen on a card, so I don't know if that pushes him into unattainable status for lots of decks, but I don't know if you can afford him. That seems pretty good.
Yeah, extra action.
I think he's worth playing for sure. Having not played the game, I think he's worth playing. Big grain
It
of salt.
seems like it. I mean, yeah, you're just totally getting so much. That seems like it could be. This almost seems like a card that you would want to include as many copies as you're allowed to and try to get it towards the beginning of a game and really have it pay
the
off
longer this is on the board, the better it's doing.
Well, and conversely, he gives you 1 intellect skill icon. So not really a card you want to ditch when you compare what he can do in play versus what he can do, when you ditch him for a skill. So
Right.
So definitely one that you want to hang on to and try and play, it seems like.
Well, and I feel like he costs a lot, but he's actually a phenomenal opening hand card for a rogue deck. Because if you start with 5 resources, you spend an action to get a resource, you pop this guy down, and now all of a sudden you have an extra action to make up for that resource you had to get. So that's super solid. We're looking forward to seeing him hit the table. I imagine it just seems like it's got to be a cornerstone of the rogue class, right? Like, that's so fundamentally good to the game.
Should we place bets to see if this one's going to get errated in the future? Because that whole, like, take an action, gain a resource, play him, there's that action back. Like,
it seems good, but it is still 6. You're draining your resource cost, so I feel like the meaty cost hopefully will keep him balanced, but we'll see. I feel like if there are broken combos that come out of the game, he might be complicit to them. But he's a criminal. He's already got the trait, so he doesn't need to run out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and hop in on this one since it was my favorite card of the demo, basically. So we've got a survivor asset, Stray Cat. Costs 1, has 1 evade pip, the ally and creature traits, and as a free ability, discard Stray Cat, automatically evade a non-elite enemy at your location. And he obviously has the ally slot and 1 health. And his flavor text is amazing too. He never came if you called for him. It always seemed like he had his own agenda, like every cat ever.
Pretty much.
So this is like we talked about in the last episode. This is Jones. Like now, especially reading that flavor text, like, yep, this is Jones from Alien. Like they nailed that design.
Yep.
I'm trying to understand the ability. Are you like tossing the cat at the enemy to like distract it or something?
Yeah. I'm captivated just staring at the art here. If I saw that cat sitting on top of a garbage can with glowing red eyes, I would probably be evaded by whatever I was engaged with as well.
And what's the class he belongs to again? The red
Survivor.
Raven thing? Survivor? I just want to call it Team Valor.
There it is.
Team Valor,
I was
yeah.
waiting for someone to bring out that song.
When Sean said Team Mystic earlier, I almost went, no, Team Valor, man. But yeah, no, that's Survivor.
Oh, I'm totally Instinct. It was a bad choice.
With those glowing eyes, I think he's like this world's version of Hypnotoad, so he's probably just like hypnotizing the enemy and drawing him away.
All glory to the stray cat.
All right, then I think the last spoiler we have in line here, now that I jumped in, I forgot whose turn it was, so we'll just go with Ian.
Awesome, because I really like this card. It's cool.
Good.
So this is an event. It costs 0. It's called Barricade. It is a yellow Seeker card. It has 3 different skill icons, willpower, intellect, and agility. Has the insight and tactic traits, and there's a few things going on here. So even though it's an event, you actually attach it to your location, and then non-elite enemies cannot move into the attached location. And forced, when the investigator leaves the attached location, you have to get rid of the barricade. This is amazing card in terms of like the flavor and just the applications. I think if you remember, hunter enemies can move. So if you throw this thing up in your location, that hunter enemy can't move there, and it makes sense. So if you leave the location, obviously you have to get rid of the barricade to leave, to go through the door. So you get rid of it. But that's so cool, like creative design there, I think.
Yes, and I love again that it's another way to deal with enemies that's not killing them, and it's just perfect.
Well, and that turn that I mentioned earlier when I asked you about Wendy's, Sean, the whole like, okay, I need to draw 3 cards this turn. Well, this is how you set yourself up to do that. Is you pick a location, you barricade it, and then you're like, okay, resources, cards, just stock up before I have to go back out.
Hunker down, baby.
And that's one of the things I liked in the demo too, is just we talked about it a bit before with the map and the locations, but just this kind of sense of movement in the game. That was something to see in another card game. See how many card game references we can rack up in this episode. But in the Doomtown card game, which recently was canceled, unfortunately, one of the things I liked about that game is they had a map and you would move your little dudes around. And with cards like this Barricade and in the demo, I like this sense of like space, and you can play around with it, you know, like you can move to try to draw off the hunter enemy, you can throw up a barricade, you can do all these kind of like shenanigans to really play and feel like you're actually like somewhere in these different locations.
Oh, definitely. One of my favorite card games was all about location. It was a location control card game, so it would be how many locations are in play, do you want to play more, because those are ones that you're going to have to try and retain and control versus your opponent. And while this isn't location control, locations are going to play a huge aspect of it, not in the way they do for like Lord of the Rings Drink, where it's like this is a threat or this is something that we have to deal with, more in that, okay, this location is connected to this and this, so you're more managing kind of placement on the board and moving around and everything. And again, you mentioned it feels like a board game kind of in that aspect, and that also kind of ties back into the tabletop RPG part, so...
Yeah, I'll echo that 100%, Nick. One of the big reasons, and I didn't know it at the time, but one of the big reasons I ended up loving the Star Wars CCG as much as I did, and the Wars TCG that followed it with kind of the same skeleton, is that it had the really intense, really cool board management. Like you built a map, and it gives almost more of a simulation quality to the card game. It's less abstract. You can literally see, like, hey, Han Solo's on the west balcony of the Cloud City, and this is where he is. And to get to the Carbonite Chamber, he's got to go through X, Y, and Z location. And then we've got that here, and that seems amazing.
You know, I'm so...
And being able to play...
I was just going to say, I'm so excited for Arkham Horror LCG to finally become one of my top favorite card games that isn't out of print, because right now all my favorite card games are out of print.
You do love dead cards, or dead card games. You know, I didn't bring it to you this weekend, so I'll probably give it to you as a birthday present when you come see me next weekend, but I have 2 Tomb Raider CCG starter decks sitting here waiting for you that I grabbed from the dead card game table at Gen Con.
That was one that, like, 1 or 2 player, it was okay, but if you get up to 4 players, then it just becomes just this, like... everybody raced to lock one person into one room, and then okay, he's done. Like he can't get out of there for a while, so now we got to take care of each other. And it was that's a party game before party games were big.
That was actually the first card game I ever remember being soloable. There are solitaire rules included, so that's pretty fun little trivia there for those 6 of you who played that.
I was gonna say,
game.
let's save this talk for when we do our dead card games episode. Then we'll do this.
That's fair enough, but it does give us a decent segue, since those are the last spoilers that we had. Guys, any parting shots on the game itself here? Anything else you wanted to touch on before we move to close the episode?
Nothing springs to mind.
Outside of just general excitedness. Excitedness.
That's about it, right?
Just excited.
Excitement. Yeah. There's an actual
No,
word for that.
excitedness. It's the Arkham Horror excitedness.
There you go. All right, guys, so let's close her up here and move into a little bit of tentacle time. Everybody loves it, tentacle time. What's grabbing you nowadays, Nick?
Let's see. Since we last convened, what have I done? Like I mentioned, my wife and I played a couple board games. We played Arkham Horror because we did that like the day after we recorded the podcast because it's like we're just talking about Arkham Horror. The game's not out yet, so let's play the board game. And we played it we played the base game with the only expansion I have, which is the Black Goat of the Woods expansion, which adds a few new elements. That expansion floods the board with monsters a lot quicker than the base game does. So we failed pretty hardcore at that. The ancient one came into play, she got devoured, and then I survived a couple of rounds and ended up getting devoured as well. We also played one game of XCOM, which we failed at that as well. Really fun board game. Yeah, we're really good at failing at cooperative games. So, other than that, still playing Overwatch a little bit every day for the most part, except for maybe 1 or 2 days here or there. Still loving Ana. Season 2, competitive Season 2 just started for Overwatch. So I did my placement matches. I'm gold, so I'm good, but I'm not great. But I'm also not bad. Yeah, I'm happy with where I'm at. So now every competitive match I've played since then, I've just dropped in the gold rank a little further and a little further. So, other than those, not much. Just prepping for Tabletop RP and this coming weekend with you, Sean, and some other people. So I'm excited for that.
I don't know. It's just that wonderful sweet spot of pirates and dinosaurs that we're about to dive into this weekend.
Two of my favorite things.
Just so perfectly sums you up as a GM.
Yeah, I like to provide memorable campaigns. So there you go.
Sea monsters is also a phobia for me, so go easy on like the plesiosaurs.
Well, there's bigger stuff than plesiosaurs out there, but yeah, we'll see. It's all dependent on you guys and what you decide to do. I'm not. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true. The beauty of RPGs, right? Ian, how about you?
Well, since last time, I finally finished watching Stranger Things, the Netflix show. Yeah,
so good.
I won't go in depth in case there's people out there who haven't watched it yet. I won't spoil it for you, but I'll just say there was a little bit of hipster in me that wanted to not like the show because so many people on my Facebook timeline were like, it's amazing. And so there's part of me like, well, we'll see about that. And then I watched it and I was like left with my tail between my legs like, okay, you're right. Like, that show was awesome. I loved it.
I would say, can we all agree here real quick, and I'm not being hyperbolic, like I mean this seriously, best thing on Netflix right now?
I mean, as far as the shows they've made, yeah, I would say so. Great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I actually meant to mention that on the last episode because it's not technically Lovecraft, but it's got a lot of shared themes with things that happen in Lovecraft that I think would make anyone who's interested in Lovecraft probably dig it. And if you grew up in the 80s or digested a lot of 80s entertainment, oh god, it just nails it so well.
It's like a healthy nostalgia bomb. Just hitting like it totally. I was like back in like my grandma's house with that same decor, you know, that's in the show.
Yes, and the wood paneling everywhere.
Totally. But yeah, I was gonna
Tom,
say,
have you seen Stranger Things yet?
I haven't yet. It's on my list.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, definitely
so
a must.
But yeah, you'll definitely dig it.
Okay, I can't wait.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it is like kind of has the Arkham feel in the sense that it's in that like weird small town genre, like Twin Peaks or like Lovecraft or. I'm one of the things I'm excited about because one of the things I love doing for Lord of the Rings LCG Drink is creating custom scenarios. And so I'm excited when people eventually create templates for this game because I'd love to see myself or someone else create a Stranger Things themed scenario in Arkham Horror. That would be amazing. So other than Stranger Things, the other thing is I finally got a chance to play Star Trek Frontiers. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. That's between that and Lord of the Rings, those were like the two things that had the biggest influence on me growing up, I'd say. So I got to play Star Trek Frontiers, which is kind of a reskin of the board game Mage Knight, just throwing kind of a Star Trek templating on top of it. I did enjoy it. I do think it's a game I like. But one thing I feel like that game experience has taught me is that I love random elements in games. Not to the point where it's like you're playing Candyland or something where skill doesn't matter.
You like playing the card game War, didn't you?
But I feel like there needs to be just that sweet spot of randomness in a game to capture my interest. Like, for example, in a game like Lord of the Rings or in Eldritch Horror or any of these games, like there's some skill involved in what you're doing. But there's that tenseness of like drawing a card off the top of the deck and not knowing what's going to come. And that's what gives those adrenaline moments of like, okay, I need this card. Or in the Arkham, it might be, I need to draw this token from the bag to win the game. And if I don't, I'm screwed. And when you hit it, it's just that adrenaline rush. So, and that also...
It took me
Go ahead.
It took me a long time to come around to this fact, but I used to kind of shy away from like when a big bad enemy would come out or an attack would fail and like I'd feel bad. But I've come around to the fact that you don't shy away from those moments because coming back from those moments are the epic stories that you think about when you think about games like that. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm bringing it up is because with Star Trek Frontiers and Mage Knight 2, from what I've heard, even though I haven't played it, it does really come down almost to like a math puzzle. Like, because there's not really that random element. It's like just finding the cards you need to add up the numbers you need to beat like monsters, which is there's some element that's fine. I know there's that's kind of like the whole Euro audience, right? That puzzly type, like,
yeah.
Let me assemble the best way to do things. But for me personally, I need that random chance in there. That's what's hooked me into Lord of the Rings so long and other games, because I want there to be skill. I want it to feel like if I'm a more skilled player, I have a better chance of winning. But I also need that kind of that tenseness to it too.
Ameritrash and proud.
Yep. Got it tatted across my chest.
Tom, how about you? What's been occupying your free time lately outside of jet setting?
That's really been it, unfortunately. Haven't really had a chance to play any games since Gen Con. But while I was at Gen Con, Mansions of Madness piqued my interest, so I went ahead and ordered that, and so it was sitting here waiting for me when I returned. So I cracked the seal open on that last night and took a look through it, and can't wait to get it to the table. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play any of it at all.
I haven't. I'm a little jealous that you have a copy.
I'll let you know how it is.
Yes, please.
It's a big box, isn't it? Isn't it like on
it's
par
kind of the
with
size
what
of,
Imperial Assault looked like?
Yeah, more or less the same size.
It's a meaty box.
But a couple other Kickstarters and other games have also shown up, so they were all sitting here waiting for me when I returned, when I came back. So
it's Christmas.
I have a bountiful. Yeah, it's basically Christmas when I returned. There were so many packages waiting for me. It was kind of insane. So I've been just kind of tearing through all that. But yeah, now that I'm back, I have this next week off before I return to work full time. So I'm hoping to get some gaming time in, and definitely looking forward to it.
Nice.
Oh, I will say I also have installed the Battlefield 1 beta, and so I'm enjoying that thoroughly. Can't wait for that to release.
Finally, we get a game set in World War One, right?
Yeah.
Right. World War II, so sick of it.
Well, and see, after all these modern shooters, like I've been saying for the last couple of years, like, put me back in World War II. Like, seriously, I miss Call of Duty 3. I miss that. Give me that. And what I really wanted was a World War I shooter. Like, seeing that trailer, I'm like, no, that's what I want. I don't want World War II again, and I don't want modern anymore. I want that. So thank you for knowing what I want.
Without you knowing it. Yes. So I too have been playing a little bit of Eldritch Horror in my case to stave off the shakes while we wait for Arkham Horror LCG to drop. Played a fun solo game where I'd soloed 3 investigators against Cthulhu. Managed to pull out the win somehow. I don't think I've ever beat Cthulhu before because he just bogs you down so hard on the sea. But I played my absolute favorite investigator, and I'm amazed that I have not mentioned her name on this podcast yet because she's the card I'm most anticipating in this game, assuming she ever gets made, which she absolutely should. Nate and Matt, take note. Diana Stanley is my absolute favorite in Arkham Horror because I love playing around. Yes, thank you. Sorry, Eldritch Horror. I love playing around with magic in these games. The whole risk reward scenario that they set up, and when you build for it, it just plays out so well, and you can become so insanely powerful if you do it right and get a little bit lucky. So yeah, played that. It whet my appetite even more, but it was a nice little play out to kind of, I don't know, explore those themes that we're looking at in this game.
So, Sean, can you call it playing solo if you're doing 3 investigators? Like, isn't that kind of cheating?
Oh, have you ever played
Apparently I'm the only one who thinks so.
Have you ever played Eldritch Horror True Solo? There's no point.
I played Arkham Horror True Solo, and it was just a race to failure.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad time.
Yeah, so it's fun. Actually a pretty it's actually a really good thing to talk about. We haven't talked about it in this game yet. It's a pretty common thing to do in a lot of co-op games. I do it in Lord of the Rings all the time. I do it in Eldritch. I've done it in Sentinels of the Multiverse. A lot of these games, as much as they try to scale for multiple players, something gets lost in translation sometimes between 1 to 3, what have you. So it's quite often advantageous, and in my opinion, it's the better sweet spot for a lot of these games to play. In Lord of the Rings, we call it 2-handed, or three-handed. No one does 3-handed in that game. But to actually simulate multiple players, even though you're playing by yourself, because it allows in this case, the encounter deck to actually maybe get out some of its combos, because when you're only pulling 1 card a turn, you tend not to see as much of it. And then with Eldritch, it's more or less just because I cannot win with 1 single investigator. So, yeah, I played 3. It was Lily, Diana, and Mark, I believe. Mark Harrigan, the soldier. And, just got some good draws out the bat and won the game, which was a big... Of course, I win the game when no one else is around to see it. So can't be verified. Yeah. You're taking my word for it.
But see, I don't... Like, for me, when I look at the box and it says 1 to 4 and I play 1 player, like... To me, it's like I got to do it as the game intends it because it's supposed to be balanced for that. You know what I mean? So, like,
right.
To me, that's the 1-player experience. The only game that out of the box is supposed to work like 1 player plays everything is XCOM, which I mentioned earlier. Because if you're playing 1 player, you still need all 4 roles. So, and that literally has a clock element in it. So then it's just like, okay, how quickly can I literally turn these cards sideways and put units on the board before this timer runs out and do it for 4 people.
Man.
Yeah, that's
it feels like I need a nap after solo XCOM. Holy cow. I produce so much stomach acid when I'm playing 4-player that game.
Yeah, for sure.
So then in addition to that, I went back to my hometown I turned 30 this weekend, so I had some fun in the car time since my wife likes to drive. I cracked out an old DS game.
Ooh, which one?
And The World Ends With You. I don't know if you guys have ever
this one.
Okay, so in my opinion, it's the best game that was produced for the DS. It's super niche, really Japanese. Like it's like as Japanese as it gets. Like you're stuck in this alternate version of like the fashion district of Tokyo, and basically it's done by the Kingdom Hearts team. It's this really cool sprawly RPG where you have a partner at all times, and every time you go into combat, the enemies spawn on both screens of the DS.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you're controlling your partner on top with the D-pad and going through like little combinations to do moves up top. And then on the bottom, you're playing the main character with different gestures based on what abilities you have equipped. So like if you slash up through an enemy, he moves in and does a quick slash, or if you draw a vertical line up through an enemy, he summons an icicle that comes up from the ground and hits them.
I might have to
combat
check this
is
game out. It sounds pretty cool.
It's amazing, and it's old at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I've beaten it before and just wanted to crack it back out. But God, playing it on that car ride just made me remember how much I freaking loved that game. So if it sounds like the flavor is up your alley, I would definitely check that game out. In my opinion, the best game on the DS.
Nice.
So that's what's been grabbing me. Obviously, we've run a little long on this episode. Excuse us for that, but we had so much game stuff to talk about. We'll close it up here, so definitely follow us. You can contact us via our email, mythosbusterspod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @mythosbusters. Our website is mythosbusterspodcast.wordpress.com if you want to go check out our episodes and or any other content that ends up coming out there. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/mythosbusters. Check out the Arkham Horror LCG Discord channel and the Facebook group. And then as well, we have another community contributor here who's started a blog. He goes by Lockwood on the Discord server. And I actually want to confirm. I believe his blog is called Lockwood and Associates, basically like an investigating bureau. So he's like a PI. So the theme is awesome. He's got a couple articles out there. He did a really fun analysis of when we can expect Arkham to drop on the general sense. So what he's done is he's gone back through every other LCG release, looked at when it was announced, when we got the article, were there demos, like looking at all these kind of landmark moments in the release of all the past LCGs. Yeah, it really is. And he goes through and uses that to extrapolate what he feels like Arkham Horror should release at. And I think his conclusion was late October, early November, if I remember correctly. Did any of you guys read that one?
Oh, I would have hoped you would have said like February or something.
So yeah, definitely go check that out. We'll do our best to link it in the show notes. Obviously, build this community up. Anyone else who contributes, if you know of any other blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, any other content producers that are starting content for this community, let us know. We definitely want to cross promote and point people in directions so we can all kind of find what we're looking for in the community. That was all I had. You guys, any parting shots before we close it out here?
No, not that I could think of.
Nope. Thanks for listening. Just waiting for the game to come out.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, if you thought that this episode went long, wait till the core set comes out.
God.
We're probably gonna have to bust up the card reviews a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll just put intermission in the middle of the episode with some music playing.
Oh yes, can we pick out some like really snappy like big band jazz music to put in
Yes.
between?
I have a library of it. Let's go.
Looking forward to that. All right, guys, thanks for joining us for episode 2. We will see you next time on Mythos Busters.